Hey everyone, welcome to the Unhandled Exception podcast. I'm Dan Clark and this is episode number 85. And today I'm joined by Chris Woodruff to chat about the simplicity first philosophy. So I'm kind of like a big fan of keeping things simple, so I have a feeling that a lot of the stuff that we talk about today is going to resonate both with me and also the listeners. So a big, massive welcome to the show, Chris. It's great to have you on.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. Big fan. I've listened to your podcast for probably since you started, and I really enjoy the topics that you have and the guests that you have on. So, and I'm just thrilled to be on the podcast also. So thank you.
Oh, thank you. It's an honor to have you on. Great to hear that you're a long-time listener.
I am.
It's weird to think about when it first started. I was thinking back to that Hello World episode I did, episode number 1. Even though we were only 85 episodes in, that was quite a few years ago. So,
wow, I commend you for getting to 85 is tough. I have done a few podcasts, and getting past 10 is a challenge. That's kind of when you know your podcast is gonna do well, when you hit about 10 or 12 episodes, and you still are excited to do it. So
nice. Well, we're getting close to the 100 mark, so I need to think of something big to do.
yeah, awesome.
Cool. So before we start, could you just give the listeners a quick introduction to yourself and tell us a bit about what you do?
Okay, well, I'm one of the old guys in the community. I think I've been around developing for 30 years and speaking and doing stuff within the .NET community for 20 years. You know, I don't like to really go into much detail. I just say I'm old guy that has lots of battle scars, that has learned a lot over the last 30 years. I've done quite a few different things, ranging from developer, architect, team leader, DevRel, sales. So I've pretty much done everything and seen everything. And I like to share my ideas and help people. So that's a little bit about me.
Nice. I like the, you reminded me when you talk about like your length of experience. And also we're talking about keeping things simple. I don't know whether you've seen that not comic, but like it's a meme going around with a graph, and it shows like the x-axis is years of programming and the y is complexity level. And it starts off like super simple for a beginner. Then as people get more experienced, it becomes really complicated and abstractions, interfaces. Oh, I might have to create an interface for everything does later. Then as the developer gets more experienced, it drops right down and goes back to being simple again. So I do like that. I'll share that in the show notes.
Yeah, and really that is my career in a nutshell. I used to be a very complexity guy. So everything that we talk about today and everything I'm writing about in the book that I'm writing about this subject, I've done myself. So you know, they say when you point a finger at someone, there's 3 fingers pointing back at you. I have done everything wrong in my career at some time that I talk about.
Cool. So before we dig into that, and we'll talk about your book as well, just a few small reminders for listeners. Firstly, this podcast has its own Discord community. So if you head over to the website unhandledexceptionpodcast.com, you'll see a big Discord link there. And also, I have a monthly newsletter where I send out hand-picked developer news items from the past month. So this includes like a dev tip and a dev comic pick on top of the news items, as well as podcast updates about this show. It's basically a great way of keeping up to date with what's going on in our industry. If you want to sign up, there's also a subscribe link on the podcast website. And lastly, a quick reminder that this podcast is brought to you by Everstack, which is my own company providing software development and consultation services. For more information, visit everstack.com. And also all my links, socials and contact details can be found on danclark.com. Right, so let's talk about keeping things simple. And you've already mentioned about writing a book. Shall we open with just talking a bit about the book? So it's in progress, isn't it?
Yeah, it's in progress. If people can go out to simplicity-first.dev and they get kind of an idea about this. I do call it, you hit on it pretty well, philosophy, because I do have examples in the book, but mostly what I talk about when I talk to people about this, like at conferences or online, it is kind of a philosophy. It's looking at and being aware of how we architect and design and construct our software, because everyone loves to use the latest technologies and the latest patterns and the latest everything, the latest AI but what usually happens is we bring something into our projects or into our teams to use that maybe we don't need. And that's the whole idea of the book. And it was about maybe a little over a year ago, I was working at a company and I just saw that people were, and developers and other architects were doing things that really had a negative effect on the work and the products that we were doing. And it wasn't because they were trying to bring in complexity. They were bringing in complexity because of the wrong reasons. And you know what? I'm the first to say, if you need a complex solution, then make a complex solution, but don't make a complex solution just because you want to bring in Kubernetes and microservices and because you've read about something and you saw something at a conference. You need to really sit back and, as an architect, reflect on what the minimal technology that you need and then go from there.
You mentioned about conferences and things. It's kind of feels like a bit of a double-edged sword where on one hand, developers are encouraged to learn new technologies and go to conferences to see things that are popular and stuff. And then so naturally developers then want to play with these things and try these different patterns or technologies and tools. And ways they can do that is in their current projects. I think that's where side projects are quite good for playing with these. But as you say, if you start trying to introduce every new and shiny thing you see into your main project, your work, then that can soon add a lot of bloat. I'm looking at you mentioned about the simplicityfirst.dev website. I've just gone to it, and in big text it says kill the bloat, which is coincidentally is the word that just came to my mind then.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, most of the time when you talk to people about these topics that I bring up, it's very common sense stuff, but then we get wrapped up in our expectations. So I will say some controversial things during this podcast. The first one is microservices is a deployment decision, not a starting point decision. I don't think anyone should probably start with microservices because it's overkill. I've been on projects where we have maybe 100 users and people were like, let's do all these microservices. It's like, do we really need microservices for 100 users? Or can using an architecture style like monolithic or a modular monolithic architecture style to start be acceptable? And then when a domain within that modular monolithic architecture becomes overriding and becomes a dominant part of that application, you can always refactor that domain out of that monolithic application into its own microservice. So it's this idea that we don't have to start with complexity. You can start simple because most of us and most of the applications and systems might not start out with 1 million users right away. So we don't have to architect, like I always say, don't architect your applications like Netflix, because Netflix has millions of users and your system may only have 24 users. So why are you architecting and building your architecture like Netflix does for 1 million people when your system only has like a couple dozen users? So it's this idea, and people love to bring in new ideas, and I'm all for that. I love new ideas and learning new things, but look at them like tools in your toolbox. You don't have to use all your tools on every project.
Your name, like Simplicity First, really does resonate with this, because like where you're saying, if you start with a modular monolith, and then if something needs pulling out into microservice, do it at that point. But for 99.9% of projects, you will never get to that point where you need to.
No.
And the same kind of principle applies to, like, quite often where especially .NET developers write interfaces for everything, and it's kind of like, oh, I must do the repository pattern because what if I have to change my database technology someday? And that what if quite often never happens. And it's actually easier to change that out if it does happen without those abstractions and just let the compiler help you through it, than have to deal with years and years of having to write repository layers and abstractions and things.
Exactly. And that's one of so in my book, I have 3 filters that I've kind of developed over the last couple years. And one of them is the primary path. Stay on the primary path. Don't worry about edge cases. Like, so many teams and so many developers worry about edge cases more than the primary path that they're on for the application. Like, work on the primary path, and as edge cases come up, then you can build those boundaries and go beyond the boundaries of your primary path. So that's one. Another filter that I have is the 2 a.m. rule. I always say build your system so that any engineer on your team at 2 a.m. can understand your system and fix a bug that happens at 2 a.m. And then the other one is that the half of rule. Like, build your system. Like, I always come in and recommend, if it's, say, like a cloud solution, can we turn off half of the resources? Or can we get rid of half of something and still have our system function? Because I think in some ways also we have this idea that we have to throw a lot of resources at our system, which, one, isn't good for complexity. It's not good for cost. So I always also take a look and say, software architecture isn't always about technology. It's also about the economics of software architecture. So why pay $65,000 a month on a cloud service bill when you can get away with $5,000? But so many architects don't think about the economics of their software architecture plans. And their CTO or CIO or like CFO comes to them and says, I just got this $150,000 bill from Azure or AWS. Like, tell me why we have to pay and why we have to spend $150,000 for this new system that we deployed. And the other thing that I write and talk about is sustainability. So, we all live in this world. We're all having an impact on the energy that we use, our carbon footprint. So think about that too when you build your software, because energy is becoming a premium right now, especially with all the new AI data centers that are being built and planned out. So there's a lot more to software architecture than just technology nowadays.
With that half rule, just to unpick that, are we talking about half? We're not talking about half the features, we're talking about half the resources. Is that what it is?
Everything. Half the code, half the resources. So that's the thing. You come in and you say, can we get rid of half? And what half is, it depends on what you're looking at. Like, if I come into a project mid-course and things are not going well and I'm trying to help out, saying, can we get rid of half of the features? Can we get rid of some features or get rid of some of the code to get down to something that we can understand and we can have a little more understanding about and a little more control over? Because I've come into projects where they're just bloated and there's edge cases all over the place that never get used. Like, don't worry about a feature for an application where only 5% of the users are going to use it. That's not a good use of your, what I call budget, complexity budget. There are times when you do need complexity, but there's other times when you really don't, and you just do it subconsciously or unconsciously. You kind of add complexity just to add it.
I guess that's where having good observability comes in, where you can actually see, oh, we've got this whole bunch of features that no one ever uses. So is that something we can just get rid of?
Yeah. I'm kind of going all over the place, and I'm sorry, Dan. I'm a little excited about this topic. It's near and dear to my heart because I just see so many, not mistakes, but so many bad paths that teams go down, that if they just used a little bit of common sense in the beginning, that they wouldn't need this. But I will say, I think a lot of this also comes from executives and stakeholders that teams work with. So let me ask you, in your career, when a team comes in and shows off a project and they discuss the kind of the plans for it, if there's all these big words and all these different technologies, and say the whiteboard is full of boxes and arrows going all over the place. In our industry, that makes people who run the company or pay for the products, sadly, that makes people think that the solution is better than if I came in and made a very simple plan and demonstrated low cost, low resources, simplicity. Our industry sometimes looks at things backwards, where complex solutions are looked at as a good thing. And because people are so accustomed to complexity in our technology industry, that I think teams and developers, to impress executives and business leaders and decision makers, throw a very complex solution to make it feel like that they have a better understanding and a better idea of what the solution needs to be for a problem.
What you're saying about simplicity, that's something you can sell as a value to a business, as in from the cost saving point of view and the ongoing maintenance. So as long as you, as a developer or consultant or whatever the person is that's trying to push back and sell simplicity, if they actually really push the benefits of this and how complexity can cost a lot and all the different reasons it costs a lot over time, I think that's quite powerful. Just going back to what we were saying before about you're not Twitter or you're not Netflix. I can remember many times I've said that to clients, just saying, we don't need to do all this because we don't need to handle this load. So I think that is definitely something that people need to bear in mind. We don't need all these massively complicated 200 microservice kind of solutions.
Yeah. I mean, so many times we have big ideas, but if you take a look at startups, most startups start with a very simple technology idea or implementation to prove what they're trying to do. And then they throw it all away. And then they usually, when they start building up their user base and building up their usage, then they rebuild the system for a larger user base or like I said, more usage. Then they can bring that complexity in. But in the beginning, they're building more proof of concepts, which I think having proof of concepts that turn into working systems that solve a problem is probably a good thing, in that you shouldn't throw out something that works until you reach a point where, like you said, the load of the system becomes a detriment to the functionality of the system. So let your system start falling apart. And at that point, then you can add complexity and build in more scale. You can scale your system. You can put it on Azure with a lot more resources to support it. But you should always kind of keep an ideal. Like I always say that a system should be running at about 80% efficiency. If it's lower, then you can get rid of resources. If it's higher than 80%, then you need to either add more resources or look at improving or building out new and better systems that bring that efficiency down to around that 80% of what you need.
Going back to your 2 a.m. test, I was thinking about this, and it feels like another very similar but slightly different version might be at 2 a.m. Could you explain it to an on-call engineer?
Exactly.
Very similar to like how they say, can you explain a problem to a 5-year-old, that kind of thing. But I'm not saying, I just realised I've kind of implied an on-call engineer is like a 5-year-old. I didn't mean that. I just more meant, can you explain it to someone that doesn't know the system as well as you do, that kind of thing.
Well, and that's the thing. I mean, at 2 a.m., is anyone fully awake? That's why I kind of use the 2 a.m. because we've all been on call where back in the day it was beepers, or now it's our phone goes off saying that we've had some kind of break in the system. And that's the thing. If you build your systems where maybe someone that's in another team has to build or has to fix something in code that their team didn't work on, you want to make it simple enough for them to understand the system, but not too simple that it doesn't kind of meet the need for what you're trying to do. So, I mean, Dan, none of these ideas are revolutionary. They're not new ideas. They're just ideas that people need to think about in their day-to-day work, because I think we forget to be simple, and we think that complexity is sophistication. And if I'm building a complex system, it's this glorious thing. But most of the time, you don't need a cathedral and a basilica. You just need a little church for your 50 people that want to come on Sunday to service.
One of the problems as well isn't just about complexity, it's also about these more complicated things are fun. These new technologies using message brokers all over the show and everything, and coming up with these architectures. Developers kind of enjoy doing that rather than, there's a book or so, I've not actually read it, but I can't remember the title. I'll find it in the show notes, for the show notes. But the title is something like Pick Boring Technologies or something. And it's along these lines that those are the ones that are tried and tested and work.
Yeah, and it comes down, I have 2 points on this area. One is, don't get caught up in resume development. So many times people, and I've known people that do this, they will build a system in a certain technology because they want to put it on their resume. And don't do that, because you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing. I mean, we're not building our systems so we can show off or for the next job that we're vying for. And I forgot the other idea that I had, but yeah, it's around this idea of keep it simple for what you have. Like you said, the other idea was, and don't build something that you can use an open source project or buy off the shelf. Like, no one builds databases from the ground up anymore. We use a database technology that we get from someplace. Just like identity. There's enough auth-N and auth-Z solutions in the world where we don't have to build identity solutions from the ground up anymore. But so many developers want to do that because, like you said, it's fun and it's an interesting thing to do. But that's not our job. I mean, if you take a look at, you're getting paid, someone is paying you to provide a service, and that service is to build a system that is within a certain time, within a certain budget, and within a certain feature set. And that's your job. And if you do those 3 areas efficiently and as simple as you can without going too simple, then you have done your job. You don't need a Ferrari to go to the grocery store. a Volkswagen will get you, or sometimes a bicycle will get you to the grocery store just as well as a Ferrari would. And I know people are going to scoff at everything I say and laugh at it. But in the end, the people that build systems that are simple actually do a better job for their teams, their companies, the industry than people that just throw 7 layers of abstraction at a problem. And like you said, use every pattern in the Gang of Four book and use every idea that they got from a conference because they just wanted to do it. And they thought that they had to make a problem complex to impress people or to make it feel like they're doing a good job.
Yeah, I guess another test you could do is kind of like, regardless of whether you're a consultant or you're a permanent developer that's going to be at the company for years, just pretend in your own mind that you're a consultant going in for a short period, 3 months to do that project. But whatever solution you come up with, the rest of the team need to maintain that for the next few years. So how do you go about that to make your solution maintainable and easy to work on and develop and stuff by the rest of the team? So imagine you're not there anymore and after 3 months.
Or you flip it and say, hey, if you had to come into a company and take over a product or a system or some solution, what would you want? Would you want something that was super complex, or would you want something that was understandable and easy to work with, that was also documented and everything? So, I mean, it just comes down to respect and understanding of what the minimal. So a lot of people think of MVP as something complex. I think of it as just the minimal viable product. Like, what is the minimal state that your product or your service needs to provide for the users that you're and the stakeholders that you're building it for?
Nice. I've just realised, how have we got this far in an episode talking about simplicity, and I don't think we've mentioned the KISS acronym once.
No. And you know what? It is keep it simple. I just don't like to call people stupid. So
I always change that to keep it super simple.
Keep it simple. Yeah, I do too. And I'm surprised that we've gone this far and we haven't talked about the other big thing in the industry is AI. And I do have a chapter in the book around AI. I think AI causes complexity because of all of the things that are fed into the training for most of our LLMs, that AI will, and I've seen it, AI brings a lot of complexity because it thinks that, just like normal developers, it thinks that you need to have a complex solution. So that's the other thing, is when you're working with AI, make sure that you watch over what comes out of the AI and build your prompts to make sure that you have simplicity in the directives that you're giving to your AI kind of agents and MCP servers and all these things coming out. What's the OpenClaw? Like, make OpenClaw do simple things.
Oh, I don't think there's anything simple about OpenClaw, but that's a separate.
No, there isn't. That is. But I do think that AI will make things complex because of how it was trained, or most of the LLMs were trained.
It's a good point, and I hadn't thought about it this way, but so obviously the LLMs have been trained on massive amount of code, like on GitHub and stuff, and there's some rubbish code on GitHub. That's true, but it's also been trained on documentation and articles with best practices and stuff. So it's kind of like a bit of an aggregation of both of those things.
Yeah.
But, and this is what I hadn't thought of until now, it's also trained on people's blog posts, and people write blog posts because they're interested in new and shiny technologies like we've been talking about. So there's a bit of a bias there where the LLMs have been trained on the exciting topics that people want to write blog posts about. So again, so that kind of leads into what you're saying about AI might be more inclined to use these exciting technologies because that's what people have written about.
Yeah. Well, if you ask Claude or OpenAI, you say, hey, build me a web app to do X, Y, and Z. What do you think it will use to implement a web app?
Oh, React,
React.
because that's that's the most popular one that's on GitHub and
Yep,
everything. So
exactly. So, you know what? Most web applications don't need to be spas anymore. I build all my web apps now with still an ASP.NET Core Razor pages using HTMX because for me, a starting point isn't a client, a server, passing around JWTs back and forth between the two sides for authentication and identity. A starting point is a server side application that has some type of system when it's in the client, it's in the browser, can have some spa like or some nice user experience improvements. But I always tell people I can build a much better experience in ASP.NET Core Razor pages with HTMX and quicker and more efficient and cheaper than they can build doing React or Angular or Vue.js or Next.js or all the different things that people push up into the browser side applications.
I guess that's the thing with AI, where you don't need to really write code anymore, but having that knowledge of just those concepts you talked about, like a static site versus a spa versus a server-side rent, like all of these things, just having that knowledge so you can guide AI to use the right choice, where AI might just, as you say, default to React when you don't need it.
Yep.
I think that's it shows that our knowledge is still quite important, even though we're not having to write as much code as we did 6 months ago.
Yeah, it's wisdom. AI doesn't have wisdom. We still have wisdom and experience and everything on our side.
Yeah, definitely. I'm aware we are coming short of time. Before we move on to dev picks, was there anything else you wanted to cover?
No, not really. I think we rambled all over the place. So I hope people were okay with me going kind of in many different directions, but I'm just excited about this topic. So I'm just a simple person too. So I try to stay simple in my life.
It's the best way. Cool. So shall we do dev picks then?
Sure. I have reintroduced myself to RSS feeds and blog posts. So a couple months ago, I got a subscription to Feedly and started daily spending about 10-15 minutes just going through all the blog posts that I used to read and all my friends and people that I know. And so I'm actually trying to get back to reading some blog posts every day. So kind of getting back to RSS and using RSS and OPML to get those blog feeds. And it seems to people are blogging more these days. I'm finding also. So it's good to read up and kind of familiarize myself with all the new ideas and stuff. Not that I'm going to use them all, but at least I know what is out there.
I used to use Feedly years and years ago. I've not used it in a long time. I use something called Readwise, which is a similar kind of thing. You can subscribe to like RSS feeds and stuff, but you can also have newsletters subscribed to it and everything. So everything goes into my Feedly and stuff. Sorry, not
Nice.
Feedly, into my Readwise account. And you can, if I'm reading an article online or see something on Twitter or something or Blue Sky, I can just right click and send it to my Readwise. So it's kind of like it just becomes this big database of stuff I want to read. So that's the way I keep up to date.
That's cool. I used to have Instapaper.
Yeah, I remember that as well.
And save stuff in there. Now I use Notion a little bit where I send stuff into a notes database in Notion to keep track of things, and then I go back in and kind of curate it to put it into different areas that I can keep track of.
Yeah, I remember Instapaper. There was Instapaper, and it's now called Get Pocket.
Yeah.
What was it called? Read It. It used to be called Read It Later. Then it got renamed.
And then it was Yeah, something Pocket. Yeah.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
it's called Get Pocket now, so or just Pocket. I did use that for a bit, but I just find Readwise does it all. I've got on my list. I want to get back into creating YouTube videos. So the first one I'm going to do is how I use Readwise, and I've also got a device called Onyx Books, BOOX, which is it's like a Kindle, but it's an Android device, but it's got the paper screen. And because it's an Android device, I can install the Readwise app.
Oh.
And that's pretty much the only app I use on it. So I've like all my articles and stuff I can read on a Kindle-like device. So it's really good.
That's very cool. Yeah, yeah, I love my Kindle device. The other thing is I'm addicted to all of the book bundles at Humble Bundle. You ever go out to that site?
I've not heard of that. Let me have a look.
Humble Bundle, they'll have these book bundles, and some of the book bundles are like around RGP games, but they'll have technology where like A-Press or O'Reilly will bring out a whole area, like a bunch of books for like 20 or 25 American dollars for like 30, 35 books. And it'll be around a certain subject. Like they had one a couple months ago around like software architecture. I think there's a good one right now around like Linux and like Linux development and Linux systems. So it's an affordable way to get some ebooks. I don't really read books front to back anymore, but I have them around for reference if I need to look up stuff. But who needs all that when you have AI, right?
I think that's it. It's kind of. I'm just looking at this now. Can you send those to a Kindle, or are they kind of physical books, or?
Most of the books you can download as EPUB or PDFs. And then Amazon has the Send to Kindle. You've seen the Send to Kindle where you can you can upload a bunch of books and do the titles, and then it will push it out to the content library and go out, and you can read them on your Kindle. So
you mentioned PDF, which is for books, is a pet peeve of mine. Do you know when content creators say, I've just released an ebook, go here and click on it, and it's actually a PDF. I'm sorry, a PDF is not an ebook. I can't send that to my Kindle and it's not readable.
Exactly. That's why I always like the EPUB.
Yeah, exactly. So my dev tip was basically just about planning tasks up front. So when I pick up a new user story, I've gotten to the habit of always starting a new note page. So I use Obsidian. You mentioned Notion. I use that as well, but depending on what client I'm with, I use Notion or Obsidian. But I start a new note page and I copy all the information from the ticket, whether it's Jira or whatever the client uses, into this note, and then I refactor it to something that makes sense to me, make it like simple as like clean as possible. I list out all the questions and unknowns I have. Then I break it down into like nested bullet point checklist items. So I try to do this full plan and understand everything before I start any coding whatsoever. And I think this, just keeping on topic with the topic today, this really helps me avoid complexity because I kind of like address all the unknowns and have a plan before I start any work. This has just paid dividends many times over, this habit.
That's awesome. Yeah. And it's always good to break down a problem into its smaller parts so you can get a handle. So one, you don't get anxiety for trying to like move a mountain. But yeah, I do the same thing. I write stuff down in journals and stuff like that to do. Like I don't know if this is on video, if you publish these anything other than audio, Dan, but I've started writing on black page notebooks.
Oh, well, this is audio only, but we can like describe it to the listeners. So Chris has just held up what looks like, is it a notebook or is it a digital device?
It's a notebook. Nope. It looks like a digital device, but it's a notebook with black pages. So the paper is black.
So what pen do you write in that? Obviously the ink's white.
Yeah, the ink is white. So it's a white roller gel pen. And I started this a couple months ago writing on black paper because you know what? Most developers, their development environments are dark. And for them, they see the code better and I've seen studies where they say that some people understand code and they read the code better when it's a black background. For me, writing on a black background, I write more and I actually understand it a little bit more and I remember it, which is kind of strange. So maybe that should have been my dev tip to begin with. But yes, so yeah, because people see me writing on it, they're like, is that like a computer screen? And I'm like, no, it's just paper I'm writing on. So
it does like look quite cool. Maybe take a photo, like take a screenshot or something. I can put it on the show notes.
I'll send you a screenshot that I had posted to a Signal group yesterday. So I'll send that to you so you can put in the show notes.
Is that still a thing, Signal?
Yeah, there's a speaker group, Signal chat. I'll have to include you, Dan. It's mostly, there's two. There's one mostly European, and there's one that's mostly the Midwest region of the United States. But I'll include you in the global speaker group, and you'll recognize most of the speakers in the group. So.
Sounds good. So before we wrap up, where is the best place for listeners to reach out to you if they have any questions or anything, or your socials, etc.? And obviously I can include them in the show notes.
Sure. Woodruff.dev is my personal website, so they can kind of find me, find what I'm doing. That's where I have my blog, and I blog a lot around, right now I'm blogging there around patterns. So I did a lot of the original patterns, but now I'm doing distributed patterns, like patterns that we can use up in the cloud and for distributed development. Then simplicity-first.dev to learn more about this idea and more about the book that I'm writing. And I'm out on Blue Sky and LinkedIn and Mastodon. Mostly I'm on LinkedIn these days. I quit Twitter and X, and I just haven't really gotten into Blue Sky and Mastodon like I did with Twitter in the old days.
LinkedIn definitely does seem to be getting a lot of traction lately. Well, it has for a while, but as in, I'm hearing a lot of people say that they just enjoyed LinkedIn and spending the time there now instead of Twitter and X and all these other ones.
Yep. And Discord. I will join your Discord. I guess I'm just being a little more mature. Discord, just for me, I just think of it as the thing that my kids talk to their friends when they were playing video games. So that I have that set in my mind from years watching the kids talk to their friends.
I think because it did start off as a gaming thing like you're describing, but a lot of like tech communities are springing up on Discord. It's becoming very popular.
Yeah.
So
I think they're moving from Slack. Yeah, Slack started charging people.
I think it's also so both the podcast and .NET Oxford user group I run, they used to be on Slack and we moved over to Discord. And one of the things I really didn't like about Slack is the fact that every single group, organization, whether it's a user group or whatever, had their own concept of a DM.
Yeah.
So like, I just want one inbox, one like list of DMs in Discord for me as a user. I don't want one per individual group. So Discord is much better for that.
Yeah, I agree.
Cool. So with that, just a massive thank you for joining me on the show. It's been like great fun geeking out about keeping things simple and simplicity.
Yeah, thank you, Dan. I really appreciate you having me on the show.
Oh, you're most welcome. And thank you everyone for listening. And a quick reminder that this podcast is sponsored by Everstack, which is my own company providing software development and consultation services. For more information, visit everstack.com. And if you're enjoying the podcast, please do help me spread the word on the socials. I normally use the hashtag unhandledexception, and all of my socials can be found on my website, danclark.com. But as we just spoke about just then, a really good place to get in touch with me is the podcast Discord. And we will include links to all the things we've mentioned today, including Chris's links in the show notes, which can be found on unhandledexceptionpodcast.com.